If someday you should see Thomas the Tank Engine puffing happily down the line, he may be on his way to a town nestled deep in the heart of the island of Sodor. The town is called Ulstead. It's a quaint little village, but one November, a thin layer of snow began to blanket the town. Despite the poor weather, trains still ran, but they had to move carefully. One morning, Percy was chuffing down the line with the mail train. Percy joyfully hummed a couple holiday tunes before he reached the station. Alongside him was another train. It was being pulled by Rosie, the USA-class tank engine. She was talking to some of the villagers. "It's nearly Thanksgiving, and I'll bring you lots of presents and parcels." With that, Rosie blew her whistle and rolled out of the station. Percy was puzzled. "Driver, what's, Thanksgiving?" His driver laughed. "Never you mind, Percy. We have to get back to Tidmouth. There's more mail trucks to pick up." As Percy traveled down the line, he kept thinking about Thanksgiving. Eventually, Percy arrived at Tidmouth Yard. Thomas was already there. He was preparing to take his final passenger train. Percy decided to ask Thomas if he knew about Thanksgiving. He had been on the railway longer than him, after all. "Thomas, do you know what a Thanksgiving is?" "Bugger if I know," responded Thomas. "It's just something Rosie mentions around this time of year. None of my concern. My concern is to make sure my branch line keeps running. Anyway, Percy, you should be headed back to Tidmouth Sheds. There's supposed to be a big storm tonight." And with that, Thomas blew his whistle and left the station. Once Thomas was out of sight, the signal dropped and Percy headed down the line, feeling more confused than ever. That night, the cold winter winds blew. What started as a small snowfall turned into a blizzard. The yards were completely blanketed in snow, but the engines were safe inside their warm shed. All the engines had fallen asleep. All except for Percy. He noticed Thomas hadn't returned yet. I hope Thomas is okay," said Percy worryingly. The next morning, the island was covered in a thick layer of snow. The engines found work difficult. Some of the engines had to clear the tracks as workmen hacked away at the cold banks of ice. With a snowplow attached to his front, Percy traveled down the line. He was still worried about Thomas. He met Rosie in the yard. She was arranging some mail trucks. "My driver says there's a lot of mail for the village. I might need another car for it all." Percy was about to ask Rosie if she'd seen Thomas when the foreman walked up. "There's been a change in plans. Rosie, we need you to go to the Little Western. There's been more snowfall than expected, and with Donald and Douglas busy with the main line, you're the only engine available." Rosie looked disappointed. But I won't be able to say Happy Thanksgiving to all my friends." Percy smiled warmly at Rosie. "Don't worry, I'll do it for you." "Thanks, but it's not the same." And with that, Rosie rolled away. Percy collected Rosie's mail trucks and headed down the line. He was making good time towards the village when suddenly, "What's that?" yelled his driver. A fogman was standing alongside the line. Percy came to a stop. "The village has been cut off by snow. Thomas is trapped down there as well. We're going to need snowplows, workmen, and a helicopter. Leave your mail trucks here and come back quickly." Before long, Percy was racing towards Harold's airfield. Percy whistled at the helicopter. "Peep, peep! Wake up, lazy wings. The mountain villagers need your help. They're stranded." "Brilliant," replied Harold. "I like a good emergency. They keep me warm." And then he buzzed away. "Now then, what's next?" asked Percy. Suddenly from the distance came two deep-toned whistles. Rounding the bend came the Caledonian twins. "Don't threat yourself, Percy," said Donald. "Aye, We've finished on the main line, and now we're here to help, said Douglas. Percy followed close behind as the two twins plowed through the snow towards Ulstead. Ah, lovely stuff, said Donald as he plowed through a snowbank. Percy was impressed. We've seen worse back on the Caledonian, replied Douglas. Before long, the cavalcade arrived at Ulstead. Percy looked up. Harold was already dropping food for the villagers. Before long, the Scottish twins and the workmen had dug a line clear. Percy rolled up to the station to find Thomas, cold but happy. Thanks for coming, Percy. No worries, Thomas. That's what friends are for. Besides, how's your branch line supposed to run if you're freezing out here? Once the work was done, Percy backed up behind Thomas and began to shunt him towards the sheds. The two friends soon arrived at the sheds nearby the Farquhar branch. They began chatting when Rosie arrived. She looked exhausted from her work on the Little Western. Evening, fellas, Rosie yawned. Would you mind if I sleep in your shed tonight? I don't think I have it in me to get back to Vicarstown. Sure thing, Rosie, answered Percy. Besides, we've had a spare berth ever since Toby went back to his old stomping grounds, Thomas added. Rosie smiled. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Percy. As Rosie backed into the shed, Thomas and Percy began to talk about the day's events. Rosie smiled. This is why I love Thanksgiving. Thomas and Percy looked confused. What do you mean, Rosie? Well, at least to me, Thanksgiving is a time where we can really stop and think about what's important. Like? Inquired Thomas. Well, despite the snowstorm, we're all safe. We have a nice warm shed to sleep in, and we have friends to talk with. Thomas and Percy couldn't help but agree. Rosie? Yeah, Percy? I just wanted to say, Happy Thanksgiving. You too, Percy. You too. The three friends fell asleep one by one with a smile on their face, thinking about all the things they had to be thankful for.